Have you ever wondered if your medical billing business would need to include medical coding? Well, today I'm going to talk about why my medical billing business does not include medical coding and why that decision has been a successful one for me. Keep watching. I'm diving into a question that I get pretty often, which is, why doesn't my medical billing business include medical coding? So I thought this would be a good video for you, just in case you're unsure and you're really not, sure whether or not you should include medical coding in your medical billing business. So when I first started out as a medical biller, not thinking about any business or anything like that, I really did not know the difference between medical billing and coding. And I know you have heard me say that before if you've been on my channel for any time. But I wasn't sure what one profession was to the other. I kind of thought it all was one thing, like it all meshed together. And so I didn't really like medical coding. I never really liked it, like I said, even from the beginning. And when I would have people throughout the years of doing billing ask me about, starting a business, doing all of that stuff, I would have them ask me, well, why don't I start a business? And deep down inside, I felt like I needed to know medical coding, do medical coding, and I just didn't feel comfortable doing it, and I didn't like doing it. So that was my main reason for not including it in my services. But I'm going to go deeper into that a little bit further in the video. I really wanted to start off by saying what the difference between medical billing and coding is. I say this very often, and I hope you guys don't get tired of me saying it, but I think it is really important for us to understand what the difference is when it comes to the two professions. When it comes to providers, when it comes to, other people in the field, healthcare professionals, I really don't think many people understand that there is a huge difference between a medical biller and a medical coder. So I'm going to define what each of them are in my own regular layman's terms. So a medical coder is a person who translates diagnoses, procedures, medical services, equipment, all of those things into alphanumeric or universal alphanumeric codes. They do this by using the patient's medical records. Now, a coder, a person who is considered a coder, would know that because they're the ones who's doing this every day. So they're looking in the patient's chart, they're reading the patient's chart, which is really important when it comes to being a medical coder. Googling a procedure code, a HCPCS code, a diagnosis code is not coding. Anybody can Google a code, but they need to look in the medical records to make sure that everything that needs to be in that record to use that code is there and is being used. So you cannot say that you're a coder if all you're doing is Googling something. You cannot say that you're a coder if you get a piece of paper from a provider that said he did a total abdominal hysterectomy and you never read the notes. You don't know what the notes said. You are not coding. You're guessing, you're figuring he included everything or she included everything that they're supposed to include, but you're not coding. A coder has to read the records and make sure everything is there. I am stressing that because many people, again, don't do that, and they consider themselves coders sometimes, or they say, well, I'm coding, but you're really not if you're not reading the medical records. Now, when it comes to billing, the billers then take, which is what I am and hopefully what you are because you're watching this, the biller then takes those codes that the coder or the provider has provided for them, put them on a health claim form, and send them out to payers to hopefully get reimbursed. Now, we don't have to look at the medical records. That's not necessarily a part of our job. And I say not necessarily because of how people define medical billers and coders, and when you get jobs to be a medical biller, the provider expects you to code, but that's really not a part of a job title of medical biller. So you might not know what you're doing. You really don't even know how to read a chart. You don't know any of that, but they're expecting that you do that because they're in this mindset that medical billing and coding is the same thing, but it is not. It is two separate, different professions. Now, don't get me wrong, they work really closely. And I can understand why people may get them confused or intertwine them. I get that all, but they are not the same profession. So I hope I'm clear when I say that. Now, let me go over why I prefer medical billing over medical coding. So I think for me, it's two separate things. So it's more of a personality thing and an interest thing. So as far as my personality, I think that I'm a person who's like an ambivert. I am outspoken, I'm out there, I talk, I do all of that stuff. And then there's times when I, want to be alone, do my stuff, do my own thing. So I kind of think I'm in the middle. And in doing that as a medical biller, I have the option or the choice to do both of those things. So there are many times when I'm working as a biller where I can do my work by myself. I'm there, I'm doing my work, I'm getting things done, and I don't need other people there around me to deal with stuff. But then there are times when I need to communicate and interact with people all the time. When I'm calling payers on the phone, when I'm speaking to the provider, when I'm talking to the front desk, when I'm talking to patients. There are many times when I am doing, a lot of communicating. So as far as that, I find that to be something that I want to do. Coders, and that's if you're a coder who just does coding, for the most part, do not have to communicate with all of these different sets of people. The one person or the people that they may have to communicate with is the providers, because if there's something there or there's something missing in the notes, in the charts, then they need to query the provider. And sometimes they don't even actually speak to the provider. They might send them an email, they might, however they communicate with them, they communicate. But they don't really have to communicate with all these different types of people. They don't call up the patient and say, oh, well, I coded this specific code because you had a hysterectomy and, we removed your uterus. And they don't do that. Now, as far as billers are concerned, we do that. We explain to you why certain things were billed and, how it went to your insurance and what your policy covers. And we do all of that. So I feel like for me, I enjoy doing that, and being a biller works for me. I also feel like I am very detail oriented, and in doing that, I think that helps a lot when it comes to dealing with, policies and payments and, all of those things. Being detail oriented is extremely important, and it works well with my personality because I am detail oriented. I love doing those certain tasks that other people may find tedious or, they don't want to do. Sometimes you might post payments. I like to post payments, for the most part. I can do that manually. That's how I learned to post payments. It wasn't automatic as it is now where you can automatically post payments. I had to do them manually. So I like to post payments, and I look for the, smallest thing, the smallest problem, the smallest penny. I like things to be done correctly, and they're right down to the penny. So if they say that I have a check for $500.54, and when I enter in everything, it only comes up to $500.53, I am looking for that 1 cent. So that might be me, but that's what it is. But I like to do that. So I kind of feel like billing works well with my personality. Then when it comes to interest, I think it really boils down to, what do you really like to do? What do you find interesting? What do you have passion for? What do you really like? And for me, that is billing. I am a math person. I am a numbers person. And so billing really interests me because we don't do, like really hard mathematical equations. It's really not that. But we do have to know, addition, subtraction, multiplication, and sometimes it can get complicated. But I like to do that. I find that very intriguing. I love to do it. I love to show people how to do it. So billing for me works well. I've heard many people say, I can't do that math thing. I don't want to be looking at numbers all day long. So if I heard someone say that, or if you're even thinking that, I wouldn't recommend that you go into billing, because that is mostly what you're going to be doing, is dealing with numbers. When it comes to coding, you are dealing more with the medical records, with anatomy, with medical terminology. You're dealing with all of those things. And if you're more interested in that stuff, I would suggest that you go into coding. Now, you can be interested in both, and you can be doing both medical billing and coding. That is totally up to you. But as far as me, I prefer one over the other, and I prefer to do medical billing. Now, let me give you a few tips for if you're like on the fence as far as whether you want to include medical coding as a service or you don't. First of all, I would say, do you have the education that you need to be a medical coder? Again, you might think that it's easy and you can Google it, but I would never recommend that. So for the most part, especially when you're getting a job as a medical coder, you may need a certification. And the certification will show that you know the basics of what to do and how to code. And if you're going to offer those services in your medical billing business, I would hope that you have that certification, that you have that knowledge, because now you are the one who is choosing the codes for the provider. So you should know completely what you are doing. So if you choose to do coding or to not do coding in your medical billing business, make sure you are clear about that in your contract. The provider needs to know that you do not code, which is what I have in my contract. I do not code. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't know how to code. Because of the closeness of billing and coding, I decided that I wanted to learn how to code, because again, I told you, I thought that I needed to know how to code. So I took a class and I learned how to code, which is not a bad thing for me. I think it was very beneficial for me because it gave me an extra additional knowledge that I needed. And I think it helps me be a better biller, but I didn't necessarily need to do that. But if you're offering services as coding, I would always recommend that you get that knowledge, you even get that certification to make sure that you know what you're doing. Also, when it comes to pricing your services, if you chose to include medical coding in your medical billing business, I think the two services should be priced separately. Now, when you have a medical billing business, there are several ways that you can price, and we'll go over that in another video. But there are several ways for you to price those services. And one of the most popular ways to price services is through percentage. I don't think that the percentage charging is more geared towards coding. I think it's geared more towards billing, because you are then getting a percentage of what's collected from the provider. But that doesn't include all of the work that you have to do to even start to choose the codes. I think those are two separate services, and they should be charged or have separate fees. Now, if you think that I'm wrong about that, then just leave a comment, let me know, we can talk back and forth. But I think it should be two separate services. A lot of providers, though, don't know the difference between the two, and they kind of clump everything together. And if you say, well, it's going to be, 7% to do your billing, but it's going to be $2,000 to do your coding, they're going to be kind of like, huh? What are you talking about? But I think that you need to separate those services. Then you also need to know what the responsibilities of those two separate services include. So, like I said, I do not offer medical coding in my medical billing business, but there are some times when I have to, help the provider in coding. Not all providers know how to code. They don't learn that in school. So if I know something, I'll pass that along, but I don't code for them. I'll just kind of give them some information, let them know if I start to see errors that they're making, that, because they're probably not aware, I'll let them know that. And so, like I said, it has benefited me in knowing coding in my medical billing business. It has benefited me because I do know coding and I know why certain things are the way they are, and I can look for certain, policies and guidelines that can help guide the provider. So now you know why I do not include medical coding in my medical billing business. In your business, you're going to be in control of everything. And that's what services that you're going to offer or not offer, how you're going to price, all of that. And that transition can make your business or break your business. So check me out in the next video to see what I'm talking about. I'll see you over there.